Hi guys, Ted Elsner, Sacramento Historical Fencing Academy. So as I said previously in the last video, we're going to be spending the next couple of videos talking about Meyer's rules of the Rostock. And we're going to start off with the first rule of the Rostock. So the first rule that Meyer gives us is the following. You should conduct all of your cuts and thrusts such that you do not lose control of the weapon or overcommit with it. Now, this by itself is excellent advice, right? We definitely don't want to end up in a situation where we lose control of our weapon. That just creates an opportunity for our opponent to attack us with Nachreisen, in tempo, etc., etc. So where do we go to figure out what Meyer means by that? Well, there are some text references that are included that give us a good idea of what he means. And we can actually see this first in the 1570, where he says, "Therefore, it is my advice, if you wish to get the hang of this art, that, as I have now often said, you learn to deliver the cuts or thrusts powerfully, correctly, and well, with extended arms, and with the strength of your whole body." So excellent advice from Meyer, right? Make sure that we're using our whole body to control our weapon, not just our arms. And that really gives us one of our biggest clues on what this rule is telling us, that we should be using our body to drive our cuts, that we should be using our core, that we should be using our stepping, that's where our control comes from, not our arms. Our arms are simply there to guide the path that the weapon will fall along, but not actually deliver the cuts. And this makes total sense. If you're swinging a weapon out at the end of your arm and just driving it with the strength of your arm, it gets tiring really, really fast. And your arm is relatively weak compared, or not so relatively, compared to the rest of your entire body. Another great bit of material shows up by taking a look actually in the 1570 and looking at the images in particular, and we start to see certain things. I've referenced previously this image. As you can see, this is the first plated longsword, and here we see in the very first image of the very first person we see a torso rotation going on that becomes really, really important in controlling our weapon and driving, it strongly with the strength of our body. On top of that, Roger Norling from Sweden, if you don't know Roger, I highly recommend his stuff. I'll put a link to his website in the description below, came up with what he calls his Rosetta Stone. It is a series of images from the quarterstaff section and from the halberd that show a set of cuts being driven through the guards to complete the cuts totally. Now this matches up nicely with what Meyer tells us in the longsword, where he explains that the cuts begin and end in particular guards while passing through another one to get there, usually the longord or the hangetort. And so if we take those images and we see how the body is moving in them, and we apply it to ourselves and practice with that, we find that we're able, by using the same material that we'll use for our footwork and our stepping, to drive our cuts with the strength of our whole body and always maintain control of our sword and whatever weapon we may be using, right? Whether it's a longsword, whether it's a rapier, whether it's a dussac, whether it's a quarterstaff, we have to do it. It's especially important to practice this with the longsword. The reality is, with two hands on a weapon that really isn't that heavy, you can cheat. You can use your arms a lot. But if you then try and take that same knowledge and experience that you've built by just swinging the arms around to do your cuts, and you go over and try something like a quarterstaff to do it, suddenly you're going to find that it just doesn't work. The quarterstaff is an unforgiving weapon in that kind of scenario. So drive it with the strength of your whole body, and make sure that you stay controlled at all times. So let's take a look at how that looks, and then we'll come back to it. All right, so here we are in our typical kind of forward-weighted stance, ready to go. And if we're going to drive the weapon with the strength of our whole body, that means that we're not just doing our cuts by swinging our sword around, but rather we're going to drive our cuts through a rotation of the body and with stepping. So for instance, a drill that we like to use to get people started on this is to start with a short edge cut that halfway through turns into a long edge cut. So I might, for instance, start down in kind of a Nebenhut position, coming up over the top into the Sturzhau and ox to strike down through, right? So there's my short edge. Then convert it around into a long edge cut, right? If I come back from below, it's kind of the same deal. Come up short, bring it over long in the hip turn, and step back up and through. Short, long, short, long, short, long. From the front, we come over the top and circle down in and cut. And then back up so I don't hit my camera. And we come up and take and then strike. And we cut down through and strike. Similar things are found with the one-handed weapons, where I might come in with a short edge halfway through into a long edge, short, long, short, long, just controlling the weapon all the way through. Okay, strength of the body. Let your body do the driving, turn in the core. Now, a lot of times we'll practice with a big core turn initially. That's for kind of a training purpose to start large. Over time, it's going to work smaller and smaller, and you're going to find that, you know, even though you're driving it from your core, you don't need as big of an action. You're able to tighten it down. This is just kind of a natural progression as we go along with any kind of element. So that is rule 1 of the Rostock. In the next rule, we're going to start to look at what happens when our sword comes in contact with an opponent and how we're going to drive from there. And we're also going to bring in the second set of rules very quickly and introduce the diagram that I mentioned previously. So guys, as always, if you have any questions, please like, comment, subscribe. Let us know what you think down below. More than happy to answer. Argue with me all you want. Gives me something to talk about and makes time go a little bit faster as we're in, you know, the apocalypse. But I'll see you next time, and thanks for watching.